What's right is what's left if you do everything else wrong. This quote is by Robin Williams, and it speaks to me in my ISM journey because it shows how you don't always know what's going to happen with your life, but you can always figure it out with your mistakes. If you do everything right your entire life, then you're never going to know what you really should be working on and what you should do, because you don't know all your options and things that you have not succeeded at. And this year in ISM, my mission statement is to gain knowledge and skills needed and to have a successful life, and to practice the many parts of architecture in today's world, to help the public to live and work in a safer, more economic, and more attractive buildings. So about me, I was born May 16th, 1998 in Houston, Texas. I am a junior at Frisco High School, and I am on the varsity baseball team. I come from a very athletic and Catholic family, so I have a lot of religious boundaries put upon me. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and I'm planning to go to a 4-year college after graduation. Also, I do work, and I'm in AP and honor roll classes, so my schedule is very busy typically. Why ISM? ISM is my way of testing what I want to be after high school. The class was introduced to me during my freshman year in Teen Leadership 1, as Coach Goff was my teacher, and she was very enthusiastic about the class. She always spoke good things about ISM and how the students go on to be successful, or they figure out what they want to do with their life. Overall, I was interested in having the opportunity just to have an independent study so I can control what I learn and not have to base it upon someone else. So for my research, I did a lot of assessments over different types of architectural styles and how architecture is used in today's economy and world and everything. It's a very big part about how I determined what I was going to do for the ISM year. So for my career outlook assessment, I did find out some of the negatives about architecture, and one would be the low salary rate. Typically architects do not make they make enough to get by, but not very much when they just start at their job. And however, architecture is one of the more persistent and faster growing career fields in America. To be an architect, you have to have a professional degree in architecture and have one of the following programs completed at university or college. So either a 5-year bachelor in architecture program, which is 5 years of just straight schooling, or you have a 2-year master degree, which is 2 years of schooling and 3 years of kind of like mentorship. So 3 years of that, and then almost 3 years working under someone. Or you do the same thing with 3 years of schooling or 4 years of schooling, just doing 2 years of mentorship. So either way, it's a combination of mentorship and school and of college. So you can learn all the ins and outs from all the technical parts that you learn from school, while you can also learn the hands-on portions that you wouldn't be introduced to from just regular classroom environments. So I did put down all my research assessments in my PowerPoint just because of not all of them pertain to my future ISM things, and they weren't important to what needed to be talked about. So for my third assessment, I researched what schools are good to go for architecture, because you don't want to go to, for example, I wouldn't want to go to Collin College to study architecture and base my entire career off of that. You'd want to go to a school that can put a name behind you. So you'd say, I went to Harvard and I learned how to be an architect there. That puts a name on you, puts something of distinguished value behind your name, so people can really look at you and see he worked hard and things like that. And so every year, Design Intelligence ranks the top U.S. architecture schools based on their educational benefits, career possibilities, and percent of graduates that find success after schooling. So the years typically, the colleges change, but in the top 3, you always find your Ivy League schools and things like that. And the school I'm most looking at after high school to attend is the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, and it is consistently ranked in the top 10 to 5 range for top architecture schools in the United States. And for my fourth assessment, I looked up the different types of architects. So there are 6 main types of architects: residential, commercial and public, industrial, landscape, and interior. To put that into easier terms, residential would be your houses and things like that, and then commercial and public would be your just warehouses and streets, cityscapes, things like that. There's industrial, which would be your power plants, your wells, dams. Landscape, which would be anywhere ranging from like parks and rec to just backyards and things like that. And then there's interior architects, which they design the interior curvatures and placement of cabinets, buildings, and anything that goes inside of the actual construction. And they also fall into the same path as interior designers. So the most important thing is to just find what you fit. Don't just settle for some place just because of its pay grade or anything like that. Just find what you actually enjoy, what you do. So don't just pick the field that most suits you. So to begin with my mentor process, I'm trying to find my mentor for the rest of the year. I had 5 interviews. My first interview, I interviewed Mr. Luis Gomez. He is the owner of GSO Architects, and we actually met at a Starbucks because he was not available at his actual office that day. So he was my first interview, so I was really nervous. I didn't know what to really expect and what to be asked for, and he was very good about that. He, made sure I knew that it wasn't anything to worry about and just ask him what I need to ask him. And so he works for a small commercial architecture group. So he does, small fast food restaurants or things like that. He does the small scale, and his company is only made up of 15, 20 people. And all of them just kind of do their own little side projects while he manages them all. So he taught me to be a successful architect, you need to know how to run a business, because oftentimes architects know how to draw very well, they know how to get concepts down on paper, but they do not know how to run themselves in an economic way to keep things running smoothly. He said, honestly, the hardest part of his job is just working with clients and making sure that it's like what they want is what you're putting down on paper and everything, and just selling yourself to clients so that your design is the best and everyone else's should be not looked at. But for my second interview, I interviewed with Ted Koyaha. He is the principal at Gensler. He's a principal at Gensler, which is one of the largest architecture firms in the United States, and they do work all around the world. So it was a pretty big interview for me. In fact, he is the one in charge of the Star Center that's being built in Frisco for the Dallas Cowboys. So overall, he doesn't do too much actual architecture. He does a lot of paperwork and talking with clients, and occasionally he will go over and look over people's work and make sure that contractors are good and everything like that. But for the most part, he just runs the business side of architecture. He said the hardest part is that designs are costly, and whenever you're making these big projects, you can't go too far into your project. Don't make things too big that don't need to be like that. Just scale things down so they fit into an actual budget that's reasonable to the consumer and everything like that. For my third interview, it was actually the same exact day at the same place, and it was not scheduled. It was Mr. Koyaha was introducing me to Ryan. His name is Ryan Rasmussen. He is a designer at Gensler, and he was a recent graduate of UT when I interviewed with him. So he was only out of college for about 3 months, and he actually went to Frisco High School 5 years ago. And he was not in the ISM program, but he was in the architecture programs that the school provided. So since he was a new person into the field, an actual professional workplace, I didn't really consider him too much to be as a mentorship prospect just because of his limited experience. But what he did give me a good idea of is how, what your life would be if you just joined into the field. And so he was constantly just being he said he was thrown into just different projects. He would do small scale things for each project. So he didn't really have something that he could call his own, which, it widened my eyes a little bit to show that whenever you if you go into architecture, your first few years is nothing's going to be yours. Everything else is going to be credit to someone else, and you're just going to be kind of helping. So he had, but on the most part, he didn't have very many responsibilities at Gensler. For my fourth interview, I interviewed with Guy Courtney. He is an interior architect and owner of Watermark Design Studio. They are an interior architect studio and interior design studio. So what they do is they mostly do different projects in like hotels and Hilton. They do a lot of things like that are outside of America. They do a lot of work in the Philippines and in South America and things like that. So with my interview with him, he taught me to understand like all parts of architecture. Don't just learn how to make a fancy looking window. Figure out that you need to know how the insides run together and how the outside fits. So there's a flow to each building. So it's not just a pretty looking outside, but the inside it's just not organized. So he just personally said that I need to find my niche, and figure out where I need to be that makes the most sense for me. Don't just follow, a random guideline. Try to figure out where you fit the best. For my fifth interview, I interviewed Barry Manners. He is another interior architect and a president and project manager at Intos Design. He was introduced to me by my stepmother because she is she's an engineer for different companies, and she sets up like the electrical engineering and everything like that for different other buildings. So she actually used to work for Mr. Manners previous to her new job now, and so she introduced me to him, and I went to his office. We had a very short interview. He was very busy. When I walked into his office, there was papers everywhere, and it was just, he seemed very stressed at the moment, so he didn't talk to me too much. So he recommends interning and getting actual experience in an architecture firm, so that way after college, once I get to college, I already have a step ahead of everyone else, and I figure things out easier, and therefore I could have a better chance of finding success after college. So for my mentor, I chose Guy Courtney, the interior architect at Watermark Design. He is a graduate at Texas Tech and a co-founder of Watermark Design Studio. He knows how to work with my busy schedule as being a high school student, and he has a busy schedule of his own. He's willing to work with what I want to do with ISM. He doesn't want to push too many things on me, and he also doesn't want to just have me do too little. He knows to find a good balance between too much and what's just not even considered work. He was my fourth interview, so I already had kind of some experience what I need to do pertaining to an interview. Dress nice, and I knew what to look for. So for my original work project for this school year, I actually did we have a backyard fence at our house. It blew down in the storm a while back, and so we needed to design like the new fence because we had pretty much a lean-to fence set up in our backyard. And so my objective was just to create a fence design that's both elegant and economically available for my backyard. And considering the fact that my family we built it ourselves, we didn't hire anyone to do it, so I was in charge of determining the price based off my parents' budget and what the fence design would look like. So the process of it was measuring. I first had to measure every part of the backyard to figure out the lines and dimensions everything needs to be. And then secondly, I had to create a new fence design to replace the old one. And that design had to be edited and very detailed, so that way whenever it came down to it, everything looked finished and right, so there was no guessing. Third of all, I had to determine the amount of supplies needed to create the new fence based off the design plan. And that's important so that way I can determine the cost of the final project, because if I don't know how much I need, then I won't know how much I have to spend in the end. So after that, just determine each individual cost of the price, and then add up all the total costs and add sales tax so you can figure out how much you'll be spending, so that way you don't go in blind. And then do a rough outline of the finished project, create a final PowerPoint of my original work, and then just continue editing it until it comes out perfect.